In this video, we'll learn how to create a simple login and logout application using JavaFX. To do so, we'll start by creating a new JavaFX project. Go to File, New, and we select Other. And in Other, we click JavaFX project and click on Next. So we give our project a name, assuming we call it FX login. And we click Next. We click Next again. For the application type, we leave it as desktop. The package, we leave it as application. The language, we change it to FXML. And the root type, let us change it to anchor pane. What name do we want to give to our FXML file? Let's call it login. And what is the name of the class that will be handling the events? Let's call it controller. And we click on finish. With the project created, we can go inside the package and we create a new FXML file that will contain the layout of our actual application, while the login FXML file will only contain the layout of our login. To create a new FXML file, we simply right click on the package and we select New, Other, and we are looking for a new FXML document. We click on Next. What name do we want to give to it? We call it main application. And the root element, we click border pane and we click on finish. The main application FXML file, this is where we design the actual interface of our application. And on the login FXML file, this is where we design the login interface of our application. So we first of all go to design the login interface. We right click on the login file and we select Open with Scene Builder. So during the creation, we selected anchor pane, and that is why we can see anchor pane in the document panel. And the anchor pane will enable us to place our elements or controls wherever that we want them to be located. Our login application will have text fields to take the user name and password, and two buttons to either login or cancel. So these are the only four controls or elements we will be adding to our login application. So we look in the library and search for the elements or controls that we want to be on our user interface. So we know that we are looking for controls. We want a text field for the username. We can scroll through till we see text field. To put the text field on the anchor pane, we can simply drag it and drop it on the anchor pane. So we can see the text field has appeared. What we need to do is to select the anchor pane and resize it now so that we can add more elements to our anchor pane. So we can relocate the text field to wherever we want it to be, assuming we bring it here and we resize it to the size we want. So we need to insert another text field to take care of the password, but there is actually a password field which we can use. So we can simply scroll through and pick a password field and drop it in our anchor pane. So instead of dropping it in the document panel, we can drop it directly on the anchor pane. So we are done with the username field and the password field. What we need to do is to add two buttons, one to exit and one to login. So we can go into the library and search for button, search for it, we drag it and we drop it. So instead of dropping another button, we can modify this to our size and we just copy and paste. So Control C, Control V, and we have our buttons added. So we just need to resize them, reposition them to suit our desire. Now we have them at the sizes we want. We can preview to see how it will look like. We go to preview, show preview in window, and we would type our username here, and we'll type our password here, and we would be able to maximize it. So in our codes, we need to ensure that it is not resizable, it is fixed size. So we close it and we learn some few things. So we need to select the anchor pane, then we do a modification, or we look at the size of the anchor pane which we'll be using in our code. So we select the anchor pane. You can select it from the document panel, or you can select it here, and we go to the layout. So in our main class, we should ensure that the preferred width and height are these values that are showing here, because these are the current width and height of our anchor pane. The only thing we need to do now is to give our buttons and text fields some name so that we can call or reference them in our codes. So we'll start with the password. We'll select the password. Let's go to the properties first. So we have an option to give it a prompt text, which the user would know this is supposed to be the username field. So we add a prompt text username, and that is what will be displayed. So we can see username showing. We pick a password field and we type password. So we have prompt text. We don't need to put a label to show this is username and this is password. So we pick the buttons and we change the names, the text on it to login, and we change the name of text to cancel. So if the user runs the application and doesn't want to log in, he can press cancel to exit. So again, we pick the text field for the username and we go to the code. And in the code, we go to FXID. What name do we want to give to this username that we can access in the code? So it's a text field. We can call it txt username. And we do the same for the password. So what name do we want to give to the password field so we can access it in the code? So we give it txt password. We do the same for the two buttons. We call this one btn login, and we call this one btn cancel. So we save our file. So we now need to check to see if our controller is actually linked, which class file will control the events or handle the events on our user interface. So we go to the document panel and we look at the controller. So our controller class has already been linked to the UI of the login. We don't need to link it again. So what we need to do is to see the codes that we need to put on our controller class. So we go to view and we look at sample controller skeleton. So these are the codes that are expected in our controller class. So we can copy it and paste on the controller class. So we right click, copy, go back to our Eclipse, and we are looking for our controller. This is the controller class. We double click and we paste to replace it. So we delete this one, and our controller class is now ready to be used. So we can see that the login FXML file has changed. There are some text fields now. There are some buttons as well. So whatever that we are doing on the scene builder is replicating on the FXML file in our Eclipse. So we see the button that we created, btn login and btn cancel, which we will now be able to access on the controller class. Before we run our application to see how it looks like, we need to refresh it to ensure that the changes are actually effected, and we can now run it. So we can see the size looks different from our scene builder when we preview. The size looks different. This is smaller, but on our Eclipse, the size is bigger. And that is because when we go to our main, you can see the size is 400 by 400, but on our scene builder, the size for the anchor pane is 379 by 227. So we simply change them to 379 227. Now when we run it, the size is what we want it to be. However, we can see we can maximize and restore. We don't want that option to be available on the login, so we can ensure that it is not resizable. So we need to change that on the main class. To make the login not resizable, we simply come to the try block. It contains the codes that will load the scene, and before the primary stage.show, we want to type primary stage dot set resizable, and we want it to be false, so it is not going to be resizable. So when we run it now, we see that we will not be able to maximize the login file, and there is no name to show what the file is supposed to be. So let's close it and change those ones. If we want our login application to come with a name on the window, for example, we can see programming tutorials on the Eclipse. We want such a name. How do we do that? We would have to do that in the try block, and we simply say primary stage dot set title, and whatever we want to be the name, we would put it there as a string. So let's say login. Now when we run it, we expect to see a title login. So we've been able to give it a title, and when we are in the password field, we see this is username, which is a prompt text. When we are in the username, we see the prompt text showing. But we have not written any codes to take care of this. We can close it now and go to the controller to write the codes that will handle the events when the user clicks on the login or cancel. So we go to our controller class, and we need to first of all write a method that will handle the login event. So we need to give our method a name, and the best name we can give to it is login. So we say public void login. And what do we expect to happen if the user clicks on login? Now there are two cases we can consider. That is, if the user enters the right username and the right password, or the user enters any other thing which is not right. So if the user enters nothing and presses login, it should display a message. If the user enters something and presses login without a password, it should display a message. If the user enters two wrong details for login and password and clicks on login, it should display a message. However, we'll just use one if else statement to handle that. So let's create two string variables which will take the username and password. So our first one is the username. Whenever the user clicks on the button login, it should go and get the text that is in a username. So you should go to txt username and get the text for us. So it will get a text as a string. We do the same for the password. Whenever the user clicks on the button, it should go to the text field that contains the password and get the text for us as a string. Now we can write our if else statement to handle what happens if the username and password are right or the username and password are wrong. So we start with our if statement and we add our else statement. So what do we want to compare in the if statement? In the if statement, we want to compare the password that the user has typed to our set password and compare the username that the user has typed in the text field to our set username. So assuming we set our username to admin and the password to 1234, we can now compare whatever string we obtain from the two text fields and see if it is true. So we say if username dot equals, what is the set username? We are saying our username is admin. If the username is equal to admin and our password dot equals, what password do we set? We are setting our password to 1234. If the username and password are same as what we have set, then allow the user to log in. Else, don't allow the user to log in. So inside, we now need to write codes which will display an alert or a message box to the user as to whether the user has been able to successfully log in or the credentials are wrong. So to do that, we need to create an alert, and we declare an alert variable as follows: alert. And what do we want to give to our alert variable? Let's call it message is equals to, and we are looking for a new alert. And what type of alert are we looking for? So inside the round brackets, we are looking for alert type. So alert type dot. When we put the dot, are we looking for a confirmation alert, an error alert, information, and what have you? So in this case, let's pick information alert. This is the type of alert we want. So it's underlining alert because we have not imported the utility for that. So we go and click on import and the error will go. Now with the alert message created, we would now be able to display some information using the alert variable called message. So if the username is actually admin and the password entered is actually 1234, what we want to do is to display a message welcome. So we can set the content in the alert by simply saying message. That is the name of the alert variable, message dot. We want to set the content in the message box. So set content and we put there welcome and we add the username. So if the username is admin and the password entered is actually 1234, we welcome the user to the application. So welcome username. Now we want to set a title on the message box. What should be the title when the message box loads? So we say message set title, and in the title it's a string. We just want it to be welcome. After that, we can now show our message. And we are done. If we run it at the moment, and we enter the right password and username, nothing would happen. So we can test it to see, because we've not done any link with the controller on the button. So we say admin and we enter 1234 and we click login, nothing happens. That is because we have not linked this method to the login button. So we need to do that at the scene builder. But before we do that, let's complete our code. So if the entered username and or the password are not what we set, what message should we display to the user? So we can simply just copy this one and do some modification. Copy in the if statement, paste in the else statement, and we want to modify some things. So in the set content, we want to simply say invalid login details. And the title we want to give to the message box or the alert when it shows is unsuccessful login. And we can now show the message. So we save it and we go to our scene builder, and in the scene builder, go select the button when clicked on, what should happen, and we go to the code, and at the code we can see on action. So what will happen if it is clicked on? So at the on action, we select login. Now we save it and we go to try to log in and see. So we go back, and what we need to do is to refresh before we run. Now when we run it, we click on login, it's showing unsuccessful login and the message is invalid details. So we click on OK. If we use admin with 1234 and we click on login, saying welcome admin. So we can click OK and we can close it. So if we want to change the alert type, we can do that. Let's test to see if we use the error, what will happen. So we click error and we run. When we click on it, now we can see error. So depending on what type of alert you want, you can change it. So let's change it to a different one to see what happens. Let's say we are picking warning. We run. When we click on it, this is what we will see. So whatever type of alert you want, you can change it here and modify it to suit your purpose. So we leave it at information and we are almost done. So let's check something to ensure that our application is actually working properly. So when we run it and the user types something and clicks invalid login details, user clicks OK, and the username is still there. The password, assuming the user typed the password, is still remaining. So we want that whenever the user clicks on the login button, whether the credentials are right or wrong, they should be cleared. So how do we do that? We just go below the else statement and we set the text field. So the text field that will take the password, we want to set it to nothing. So we say .set x, and what we want to set it to now. Or we clear it and we do the same for the username text field .set x now. Now when we run it, whether the username and password they are right or wrong, and we click login, it has been cleared. So login invalid and the all being clear. So we can try admin and the right username and password. Login, welcome, and clear. So we are left with adding a method on the cancel button such that when the user clicks on cancel, it exits the entire application. So we close that and we write another method in the controller class. So we go below the login and we write a method, public void cancel login, and we just need a line of statement to get it done. There are various approaches we can use to exit the application once the user clicks on cancel, but the simplest one is to simply say platform.exit. So with this, whenever the user clicks on cancel, what will happen is to exit the application. We save it and we go to the scene builder to do the linkage. So at the scene builder, instead of login, we select the cancel button, and at the same place on action, we are looking in the drop down list for cancel login. So whenever the user clicks on cancel, it's supposed to simply exit. So we need to save our FXML file and go to our codes. Before we run it, we need to refresh and we click on run. Now when we log in, message is showing and we click cancel, the application exits and we can see it stopped running. So that is how we can exit an application with a button. So now let's open our main application FXML file and do some modification. We open it with the scene builder and we can see it is a border pane. So what we want to do is to simply just drag a button into the bottom area and we call it logout. So we look for a button, we select it, drag into the bottom, and we have it. So this is our button. Let us call it logout. We change the name from button, we select the button, go to the properties, and we change the name to logout. The next thing we need to do is to ensure that it is linked to the controller. So we come to the controller. Which class do we want to handle the events on the controller? So we select application.controller so that if the user logs in, it should show this interface, and when the user clicks on logout, it should show the login interface again. So we can preview this to see. This is how it will look like, so that when the user clicks on logout, we want it to log this interface out and present to the user the login interface again. So let's modify our border pane a bit. Let's change the size. And when we preview it now, this is what we will see. We can decide to also make it not resizable. So we close this one and we go to our Java codes to see how we would ensure that when the user clicks on login and successfully logs in, it should show the main application to allow the user to perform whatever task he or she wants. First of all, let's comment this message box out, because when the user clicks on login and successfully logs in, for example, admin and 1234, and the person clicks on login, we don't want this message box to show anymore. We want that when the user clicks on login, the login interface should disappear or hide and show us the main application interface. So what we need to do is to comment it out. We simply select all of them and comment it out. Now inside here, this is where we write the codes to hide the login interface and show the main application interface. To prevent us from writing so many codes, we are simply going to look for the codes that load the login FXML, and we copy them and paste them here. So we go to the main, and these are the codes that load the login FXML when we run it. So we simply copy these, go to the controller, and in the if statement, when the user enters the right credentials, we want it to load the main application.fxml. So we can see our main application.fxml is using a border pane, whilst the login FXML file is using an anchor pane. So we need to do a modification. So instead of anchor pane, we need to change this to border pane because the main application FXML file we are loading is a border pane. So we copy that, go to the controller and change it. Paste and paste. So let me minimize this so we can see more. Now there is an error because we've not imported the border pane utility. When we import it, it goes. So there is still an error because we need to declare a stage called primary stage. If we go back to the main, that stage has already been declared in the method. So we need to declare that stage called primary stage before we can use it here. So we do that, say stage, primary stage is equals to new stage, and we need to import the stage utility, import. Now there is an underline or an error because it might try to look for the file name and it is not finding it. So we either surround it with a try and catch as done in the main, or we add the throws declaration. So add the throws declaration, and again we need to change this one. It is not called login, it is called main application FXML. So we change that .xml, and this should work. They are both using the same styling sheet. The styling, we will look at that later. Now we can decide to comment this one out because we want our border pane to be resizable. So we delete it. And what name do we want to display on the window when it goes? Let's say welcome. Now we can save it and we run to see if it actually works. So when we run it and the user enters admin and 1, 2, 3, 4, now the welcome is showing and the login as well is still showing. We can maximize, restore, we can expand it to whatever size we want. So how do we ensure that when the user clicks on login and the main application shows, this one should hide? So we need to add some codes that will hide the login interface whenever the user successfully logs in. So we cancel and we go back to our code. To ensure that we are able to hide the login interface when the username and password are right, we need to get the window in which the login button is. So whenever the user clicks on login and the details are right, this window should hide, whilst the window containing the main application should show. So we simply go back to the codes and we look for the button. That is the name of the button. It's called login, btn login, and we get a scene containing a login button, get its window, and we hide the window. So this will hide the login interface, and these codes will show the main application. When we run it, and we enter the right username and password, and we click login. The login user interface has disappeared, it's hidden, and we now have the main application. We would come later to modify this main application to whatever we want. When we click on logout, we expect that the logout should take us back to the main login interface. We can maximize, store, and expand it to whatever size we want. Let's close this and we learn how we can now write a logout to bring back the login user interface. Before we can do that, we need to ensure that our logout button has a name and is being linked to a method in the controller that will handle the logout. So first of all, let's just write a method called logout. So public void and we would come later to write the code. We save this one and we go to the main application.fxml. We open with scene builder and we select the logout. Now at the logout we give it an ID, it's a button, so btn logout. And what are we looking for? When the user clicks on logout, what do we want? We want to select the method called logout. So now we can save it and go back to the code to decide on what happens when the user clicks on logout. So we save it. Now we need to copy the declaration of the logout button to the controller before we can access it. So we go to view, show sample skeleton, and this is the only one we want to copy. Copy this, close it, go back to our codes, and we paste it. Now we can call btn logout in our logout method. So in the logout method, what we need to do is to first of all hide the main application window and show the user login window. So we need to add a code similar to this. We just copy this one and we paste. So here we want to hide the main application interface, and instead of btn login, we are looking for btn logout. So this will hide the main application interface. Now we need to write codes that will display user login. And to do that, we don't have to write them again because they already exist in the main Java class file. So we need to go to the main, and the codes we copied, let's copy the same codes, then go back to the controller and we paste. The only thing we need to do is just to declare the stage so that we can use that. So instead of typing it again, we say copy this and paste it. And we just need to surround it with a try and catch, or we add a throws declaration. Add throws declaration, and we can now run it to see if the logout works. So first of all, before we run, let us refresh. And we now run it to see. Now let's log in. It's working. We log out. It's brought us back to the login. So we've been able to successfully design a login, logout application, login, logout. Cancel, it exists. So with our login and logout working, Our next task will be to add components to our main application and see how it goes. So we would go to the scene builder in our next video to see how we can play with the components on our main application to let it do what we want.